Alright, so Mayhem is really one of those bands that, to the people in the know, really requires no introduction, like, at all. But given that I'm assuming that you don't know, I'm going to give you one. Alright, so Mayhem is one of the first Norwegian black metal bands. It was formed in 1984, really early, really underground stuff, and it and its sound played a pivotal role in transitioning from the early first wave black metal to the later second wave black metal that came to dominate the early 90s underground metal scene in Scandinavia and other parts. And the Deathcrush EP, their first official release, played by no means a small role in this. I mean, it was one of the first black metal releases by a band not named Bathory or Hellhammer or Celtic Frost or even Venom for that matter. And because of this, the importance of this EP cannot be understated like at all. Alright, so the music here is raw. And I mean real raw. Like, the production is minimal, the recording is low fidelity, the guitar tone is basically non-existent, the drums are frenzied and warlike and all over the place, the vocals are basically just screeches and howls and just the most extreme form of vocal cords shredding that you could think of. I mean, this is extreme music, this is extreme metal. This isn't music for the uninitiated. You can't just leap into metal listening to this. I mean, I'm sure some people can, and some people have probably, but just a general rule, I would not recommend black metal or even this specific release as a stepping stone into the world of extreme metal. It's not. It's gory, it's gruesome, it's visceral, it's brutal, it's everything that extreme metal was meant to be in the 80s when it was coming out, when it was still in its early infancy. And, you know, a lot of bands back then, like you got the Slayers, the Venoms, the Bathories, they played around and they flirted around with the gory lyrics and the satanic imagery and the image and everything. And that was all just for fun, you know, that was for the edgy appeal, that was for the sales, that was for the attention. They were just playing around with it. They weren't really Satanists, they weren't really devil worshippers, they didn't go and like kill people, they didn't commit the acts that their music talked about. In this regard, Mayhem really changed the game in terms of that, because even though they themselves were not really murderers in the way that their lyrics described, they looked and sounded sincere, more sincere than the other bands that had come before them. And I think this sincerity is very good for establishing credibility, but it did hurt a little bit the overall quality of the product, because the lyrics, as I've said, are gory, really gory, but they're also really basic, and this combination can end up making them seem really cartoonish and maybe rather silly. So, I mean, you know, yeah, they're gruesome, they're, for untrained ears, for first-time listeners, they could be even disturbing, but once that initial shock wears off, and you can just look at them for what they are, you can see they're kind of corny, and it's silly, you know, it's amateurish. I mean, the music is intensity defined, you know, there's no doubt about that. That was everything that this music was supposed to be, but the lyrics are childlike compared to what would later be done in death and black metal later on. I mean, I don't mean to say that all the bands around this era were writing childish lyrics like these, but these lyrics in particular, and those of a lot of other black and death metal groups of the time, they were amateurish compared to what would later come. Okay, let's talk about the beyond. Black metal, as it's come to be known nowadays, today, in the present times, doesn't really sound like this. This EP doesn't really define and represent black metal as we've come to know it today. And this is thanks in part to the infamous branching off of subgenres in metal. You know, you have all these different diverse kinds of black metal with this huge sound palette that you can't define by this very basic, very simplistic, very old, archaic sound. You know, black metal doesn't rely on the whole tremolo pick at 300 beats per minute for 3 or 4 minutes while you got the blast beats and you're screeching and stuff approach anymore. They don't really do that as much. And even in this regard, this release was pretty much a stepping stone for what came later on, because while it is mostly just intense breakneck music, there are touches of variety here, especially in the instrumentals. The opener, Sylvester Anfang, is what basically amounts to a 2-minute drum solo. It's the intro, it's just tribal warlike drums droning on, just going for 2 minutes, you know? And at this point, if you really didn't know anything about this release or the band or anything or the music, then you might not even know what it is you're going to listen to. It could be forgivable to just not know what to expect before Deathcrush, the title track, comes in. The other instrumental here is Weird Mannheim, which is the penultimate track, and does similar work to Sylvester Anfang by disarming the listener before the barrage of noise and violence and sound kicks in. And it's really nice. It's just a short, moody piano piece. It's very atmospheric, kind of eerie, and it just gives way to pure effing Armageddon. Just pure sonic attack and blitzkrieg, you know? And even within the actual songs themselves, there's a bit of a dynamic thing going on. Like Deathcrush and Pure Effing Armageddon, they maintain their intensity and drive even while slowing down in certain parts before coming back up to regular tempo. And actually, Necrolust does quite the opposite. Instead, in the middle of the song, speeding up and getting more and more intense and more energetic and frenzied, and just it really gets you pumped, and it's really great. And I think ultimately that's what the strengths of the album are: the energy, the intensity, and a touch of variety. So despite the lyrical weakness of the album, just the fact that it plays off its strengths so well just earns it a good rating in my book. And for that, I will give it a good solid 9 out of 10. And that's my rating. Bye!